right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Experts Dig In with Doggies for Dementia. This is our program on YouTube, although it gets shared out everywhere we possibly can for Doggies for Dementia, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we raise awareness for Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. And we really do our best to get information out there for caregivers because it's not an easy thing. And working hard to educate and reduce stigma and isolation and do all the good we can. And we love dogs. Dogs are involved in it in our photos because people will stop and look at pictures with dogs and read the stories and learn more about dementia, which is our goal, of course. And then families are gifted these wonderful memories and photos of the experience. And it's a win-win all the way. And it sure makes my heart big. And today I'm so excited because we have a guest, Vicki Tapia. Vicki, did I say your last name right?
You did.
Oh, good. That's the first time I've ever said your last name to you out loud. Yeah, I'm so excited today. And Vicki and I have chatted a bit and we've known each other online for a while. And oh my gosh, she's got some great pearls of wisdom for us. And so Vicki, I'm gonna look at this a little bit because she wrote a wonderful, wonderful intro for me. And so when Vicki's parents were both diagnosed with dementia within just a short time of one another, like months of each other, she became a caregiver, not really knowing what to do or how to do it, and just found herself like learning anew every day. And how many of you have had that experience, right? So I'm really excited to hear what she has to say about that. But she didn't finish with that. She took those experiences and wrote a book called, I want to get this right, Somebody Stole My Iron, a family memoir of dementia. And I know you've won some awards with your book too, right?
I have. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I read one was best Alzheimer's book of all times. So look, you get the pom pom. It's wonderful, and I can't even imagine all the people's lives that you're touched by writing the book, and then you took it another step further and just continue to honor your parents and their memories by founding All's Authors and still working in that, right? Where those of us who write about Alzheimer's disease and other dementias from all different aspects, I see children's books in there, I see just a wide variety, and have them in one place for people to go for resources. So you
Thank-
you um you have my respect for sure. And I'm delighted that you're here on the show with us. And so
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank
thank
you.
you, thank you, thank you. And just before this, y'all don't know, but her really cute, is he a schnauzer? Schnauzer?
Yep.
Jackson, who's 11 years old young, I should say 11 years young, was visiting us, but he wanted a bit too much attention. So he's downstairs with daddy. So Vicki, I gotta say, being a caregiver and not knowing, I don't, did you even know anything much about Alzheimer's or dementia?
Not really in passing. I knew what it meant that your mind started to go from you, but I had not read anything really very deep about dementia, Alzheimer's at
Yeah.
that time. I was so it it was out there in the netherworld, but not something foremost in my mind. Obviously, by my reaction to a few years that went by, um, that I was oblivious to what was going on.
So what reaction are you referring to? The few years that
Years that my mom was had mild dementia, that the non-reaction or the justification, um,
mhm,
normalizing what was clearly not normal in retrospect, but
mhm.
somehow able to normalize it at the time. It literally did not cross my mind that she may be in the early stages of dementia. That was not even a consideration, nor did I know that my dad was probably also going down that road. I just, it went right over the top of my head.
Did they both have Alzheimer's or a different form of dementia?
Different form. My mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and later into her journey, it was also vascular dementia that had seen. My dad had Parkinson's related dementia. This
Okay.
was less obvious to me. My dad was always mild mannered, quiet,
Mhm.
very easy to get along with. So it just wasn't that apparent. My mother, on the other hand, was very feisty and determined and controlling, and it, there were more signs from her that were not recognized as signs at
Mhm.
the time.
You know,
Really, looking back, it
yeah.
was for me
Well,
like this.
hindsight. Hindsight's 2020 and doesn't count when you're in the middle of it. I mean, it's like because it's a disease that progresses typically kind of slowly, right? That little things happen, and we as humans become really good at adapting. And we go for our strengths and don't do as much. If something's really tough for us, we find a way around it, right?
Right,
And
absolutely.
that happens
I
when. Mhm.
I was going to say that I think part of the reason that it went um, undiagnosed for so long, my parents lived about 2 hours east of where I live. So my primary contact was with my mom over the phone. We talk a lot. I would try to get down, drive over there as often as I could, but we spoke more on the phone. Much easier to, as you say, to cover up and make things appear normal. And there were little things, but easily dismissed as
Yeah.
stress. Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, and I don't know about you, but as my mother ages, I don't even want to think the thought that
Mhm.
she's not doing well. It's like unbearable. And I will kind of make light of it to save myself the heartache of seeing problems or seeing a decline. And I think it's to save myself. I look at it and I just find it somewhat like I don't want to think about it. And you take that, and with the person who's really good at covering up, life is good.
Life is good.
Life
Denial
is good.
is
A
bad.
denial is a beautiful place to live until you can't anymore. Yeah. Yeah. Now looking back, so let's say for people who are listening to saying, wow, my mom lives 2 hours, a ways away, and I talked to her on the phone. Are there anything now looking back you heard that you'd say, if I now looking back, I heard this and that was a clue?
Um, you know, she became crankier and she was probably frustrated by what was going on. I'm sure it was terrifying for her,
Yeah.
but there was no one to talk to about it. She kept it all inside herself. And
Oh,
she was sharper, perhaps. The what I experienced was not so much talking to her on the phone. She was a really good actress, but what I saw when I visited in person was the telltale signs that I can look back on with clarity now.
yeah. Okay. So what were some of those?
Well, things started small. Her, one of her granddaughters sent them a computer that she no longer used. So everyone in the family was very excited by this. We thought, oh, we can email, we can send pictures back and forth. It will be great. Good brain food for them to
Mhm.
learn how to operate a computer, join the digital age, right?
Mhm. And
This
that one of the best things you can do for your brain is to learn something new to challenge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I thought this is perfect.
Uh-huh.
So we all kind of pitched in at various times to help give her different tutorials on how to operate the computer. And really for a while things, although we didn't do it as often as we had thought we would, things they would email back and forth with us. My dad learned how to play solitaire, and that was what he liked about the computer. He was not into the email part of it, but it seemed gradually over time mom's ability to she would say, there's something wrong with this computer, I just can't make it go. And I thought, well, that's possible. And
Yeah.
she would has a technician from the internet server. He was so kind to her. He would come over, this young man, and
Yeah.
I don't know how many times he came over, and she would know, I'm sure he told her what to do, right? How to
Right.
operate the computer, but
Yes.
it didn't stick. So when I'd go down there, I'd walk her through it and she would take copious notes, writing things down and nodding her head. And I eventually ended up putting yellow post-it notes all around the monitor of her computer, step by step what to do. Unfortunately, it seemed like even though she had it when I was there with her, when I left it, the knowledge walked out the door with me.
Oh, yeah.
So that it finally we just gave up. She just said, I can't do this anymore. So, we let that go.
And
I have so many examples.
I think I'm gonna so with the computer, there are other things that are relatively new for her generation. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I guess maybe the clue was she was able to use it and then it became a challenge because that would be a tough one for me, seeing that there are challenges with it because I have challenges too, but so when my mom calls with questions, you know, I'm kind of like, yeah, that happens. And so, yeah. But the, I guess the big thing is that there was a ability and then a change in ability. Yeah.
And somehow I thought, well, she is getting older. She's almost to her mid 80s now. I guess this is bound to happen. We'll just let it go.
Yeah. Oh,
And,
I
and
get
then
that.
there were things like once I was visiting and she said, could you come in the kitchen for a minute? There's something I want to show you. So I said, certainly, followed her in there and she opened the drawer and took out and held up a utensil. And she said, what in the world is this? And what would I ever use it for? It was her egg beater. I thought,
Oh,
odd. That's kind of odd. I
yeah.
also I also knew that my dad, who had a slow growing prostate cancer, was having to go to the bathroom numerous times during the night. So he was waking my mom up to help him because he had trouble with his balance in the parking.
Oh, oh my goodness. So
So she
neither
was
of them slept well.
no, she was getting at best very, very broken sleep. And
Oh,
looking back on that, adding to her stress level and really they're saying broken sleep like that can hasten any cognitive decline. So of course at the time I didn't
yeah.
trust
Well,
my
yeah, but and then again, you can say, well, nobody's at their best when they're not getting good sleep.
exactly. So that was my rationalization. She's
Yeah.
not
And so it sounds like she was kind of a caregiver in sense to your dad then too, right?
a caregiver to my
Yeah.
dad.
Which
Another time,
increases risk
it
also.
does. Yes, it does. Yes, and just being a woman.
Yeah.
Kids were home from college break, two of my kids, and we drove down on it just for the day to visit. And my mom met us at the door holding a sheet pan of cookies with a spatula, and they were very, very flat and very, very black. And we're like, whoa, this isn't normal. And so, it was a little hard to eat them, but we stuffed them down. And again, I thought, well, she's stressed out and she just overcooked them. In reality, she probably couldn't really follow the directions and she probably didn't put in all the flour or who knows what happened, but
Yeah.
something was awry there. And that same visit, lunchtime, we were sitting down to eat. My son opened the fridge to pull out the gallon of milk, and there was like the top inside plastic of the gallon of jug was green, green,
Oh,
green as in mold. And he looked at me. He didn't want to say anything because he knew my mom was very feisty. So I was like, gee, mom, that milk looks like it might be past its prime. Trying to be diplomatic. I didn't want them drinking it. And so she looked at me and she said, well, it was just fine at breakfast. Um,
um,
Son then went over to the drain and poured it down the kitchen sink. And that was
yeah.
the end of that. I made the mistake of I sniffed her dishcloth. Ooh.
Oh,
And I took it down and put it in the laundry room and got a clean one out. Didn't say anything. A few days after we got home, my phone rings. It's my mom, and she says, I know you think I'm a filthy housekeeper. I saw you changing out the dishcloths, and why are you bothering to come down and visit us? And if you're going to do things like that, she railed on and on for a while. And finally, I had very poor coping skills. I hung up on her.
Vicky, you're so funny.
Oh, the next
Uh, but
so soon.
okay, so yeah, I think this brings up a really good a really good subject is that when, and I saw this a lot in the clinic, and I thought myself, I feel for you because I'll probably be in the similar situation. But when you've got a parent that is, when you might be a little intimidated to approach them or to correct in any way,
Little intimidated.
yeah, real intimidated, and because you know that could start something you don't want to start at all. That's not your intention. And how would you approach it in a right way? And then when there's these things that you see and you can't really ask about it,
Right.
to even investigate it a little bit more,
I saw how
right?
the milk thing went. So I wonder.
Yeah, because when, if a person's not very irritable and you can kind of joke around with them, there's one thing to say, "Whoa, when did you take this out last?" And they might say, and you can investigate it a little bit, right? And you can talk about it a bit and maybe find out that in fact she hasn't looked at the milk in days and didn't know it and just was embarrassed. But when someone is feisty, you're just gonna do what you can and lay low. What was that, duck and run.
Yeah, yeah, that's, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I do think that makes it tougher.
On the
um,
way back driving home that afternoon, my children and I talked about, whoa, is it safe for them to be there alone? I mean, this is kind of scary, the fact that they're eating moldy food, and how do we know what's happening when we're not there? We had this big long conversation. At that time, I think I started broaching the subject now and then with mom, like, gosh, wouldn't it be great if you moved up here and maybe, could get into a place where you didn't have to shovel walks, and there was just more people around, and my mom and dad would have none of it. They'd lived where they lived for 80, 90 years, and they weren't about to say they were going to leave their friends that were left and their
right.
and
Yeah, isn't
and
that
their
sad too?
familiarity with things, which of course then later I learned how hard it is to move somebody with dementia away from the familiarity. Another
Stressor.
I've looked back on many times thinking, should I have left them in their town and just had them move to the the nursing home there right away? Or did I do the wrong thing by moving them closer to me so I could be more involved in their care? And
Hmm.
I, depending on the day you ask me, I
Yeah, it depends on the day, right? Because how do you know? You don't know what happens if you take the right turn on the fork instead of the left, or the go
exactly.
straight. And so you did end up bringing them closer to you then, or having the move
Well,
made?
there were a series of incidents that happened. Um, I want to come back to when I knew something was wrong with my mom's brain, and that was
Mhm.
before I moved them.
Yeah.
But the reason what happened was my dad, my mom, of course, as we talked about, she was helping him. He had a walker. And she called me one morning and she said, "Well, I did it." And I said, "You did what?" I hope it wasn't burned out. She said, "I put your dad in a nursing home for 10 days respite care." And I said, "What?" Because they always talked about they were never, as most older people say, never
Sure.
ever going to a nursing home. And she said, "Yep, last night when he was getting out of his chair, he fell and he landed on top of me and it scared me. So I'm just leaving him there for 10 days respite care. That's all." I was like, okay, yeah. So he didn't come back, and the weather started to turn bad. My parents lived in a condominium unit. There were four units, and the other three um, people, three couples, had moved south for the winter. My mom was there by herself in this facility, and she was trying to shovel the walks by herself.
Mhm.
There's this 85-year-old woman outside trying to take care of things, and I call her twice a day, and I
That'll be me, by the way, when I'm 85.
okay, all right, now we know you got a little stubbornness too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, one day it was really bitterly cold winter. She called me and she said, "I'm ready to move." And and that it was her idea. It was okay. My
Oh,
idea is not okay. So anything people can do, I think you plant the seeds and you plant the seeds very carefully. Plant the seeds. Don't put too
mhm,
much dirt on top of them,
right.
and,
Mhm,
and hope that if you aren't insistent and
mhm,
demanding about it, that they'll come around
right.
to the idea. It's the same thing as getting her in for an evaluation eventually too. So
Tough. That's a really tough thing. And and I'm equating to, of course, my phone rings. I'm equating to when people would come into the office and families would say, "Oh my goodness, I want to. We need to do this." Like you're in the position you see you need to do, but you want to honor their independence and their spirit and and
Back to the needs. Yes.
yeah, yeah, that balancing out is just such a
Well, safety,
challenge.
respect. I
Yeah, because they're both love. You're loving by saying we're going to take care of you and make sure you're safe and that you're not eating moldy food. And it's also love to say I honor where you're at and your wishes and what you have, your life you've put together. I honor that too. And so, wow. Well, thank goodness the seeds were planted, right?
And by then she had been diagnosed, and it was,
Wow.
as I said, a bitterly cold winter. This was in December when she agreed to move. So January, the week before we were actually moving them, my husband and I drove the 2 hours to just to see if because she was going to start packing, right? And we got there and she had one big box in the middle of the floor, and she'd put like a pillowcase and a figurine and a pan. I mean, totally unrelated things, set them in the bottom of the box. And I was so irritated with her. It's like, this is all you've packed? Because I had no clue. Still, I needed to read more about this disease. She was
Mm-hmm.
probably doing the best she can, and I
Right.
was indignant about it. But I was about it. I was thinking that in my head. This is all you packed. Um, so just to know.
Yeah. And so you remember that even now, right? Is there guilt associated with that? I
Yes,
mean, we're women, so guilt is like it's like an appendage that we live with, like our arm, right? But do
it is.
you?
And I felt even guilty about suggesting maybe there was something wrong with her brain. What tipped me over the edge is when we had a birthday celebration for my dad when he turned 90, and all our family came from out of town. And my two nieces, my mom's two oldest grandkids, were coming from the West Coast. It was sort of a big deal. And I said, "Oh, instead of both coming to the door at the same time, because you're the surprise, come individually and ring the doorbell." So the youngest one came, rang the doorbell. My mom met her at the door, and my mom was like, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you," and brought her in and called her by name. And we sat there, and the doorbell rang again. And my mom looked around the room, and she said, "Well, who could that be?" Got up, went to the door, opened it. There's her oldest granddaughter, and she looks at her and she goes, "Who are you?" And we all went, and we
Oh,
had a collective intake of breath, like, "Oh,
this is
something."
before diagnosis.
Yes, this was what tipped me to like something's not right. It took
Mhm.
another year before I finally got her to go in and be evaluated, and it was moderate Alzheimer's by then, which
Oh,
kind of threw me that had already progressed to moderate. The doctor said, this is not uncommon. By the time I see most people for diagnosis, they're moderate.
yeah.
We
Mhm.
all rationalize. It's just a
We
it's
do. And it's dreaded. I think one of the most dreaded things is losing your ability to remember and to function and to live
terrifying.
independently is
I think I put myself in her place more now than I obviously did at the time, and think
Mhm.
how terrified I'd be.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
our family really handled it well. We kind of chuckled and said, "Oh, we've got too big of a family, hard to keep track of us all." And we just,
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
go. Nobody.
Humor
Oh,
is usually good if it's accepted by the other person. Yeah. Yeah, so when you hear that from the doctor, it's moderate and uh, what was going through your mind?
how did I miss this? And then things started coming back to me, and the aha was, aha. There were signs all the way through that I just normalized. I rationalized.
And were you the primary family member that is like deemed was there anyone else looking in that you could talk to, like another adult you could talk to and say, I know you talk to your kids. Was there anyone else? Are you an only child? Were there other siblings?
I do have an older brother who's 15 years older than I am. He just firmly stated he preferred to remember them the way they were, and he's not involved in their care. So there,
Not an uncommon
I've
response.
heard that especially males, if there's
Yes,
a girl, they're usually the caregiver, usually, not always.
right.
I have my husband who is really understanding, and
Oh,
thank goodness. I have another close friend who's both her parents, no, just her mother. Her mother suffered from dementia and did for many years. She um, and I would commiserate at times, but really you can only commiserate so many times a week with your kids, your husband, your friend.
hmm.
A lot of it got I got rid of it by writing it down. I let it
Yeah.
out. It was a calming force for me to be able to write it all down. And the more
Yeah.
I wrote, the more I remembered that had happened.
Yeah.
Uh,
Did you have, so you journaled, essentially then, right? You
I
journaled with
journaled to
the,
help myself cope. Mhm.
what's that?
I journaled to help myself cope.
Yeah, with the intentions of this is I journal for that reason too, so I get it. It's almost like when you put it out on paper, then you can just close the book and say, okay, I just let go of a little bit of a burden there, and now I can think about other things, right? Did you
Yeah.
have any ideas that this would become a book or that you would do anything? No, no way, right? No.
It was no, just it was how to cope with stress. Write it down. I
Yeah.
a long journal keeper. I have a drawer full, a large drawer full of notebooks that I fill. I started keeping a journal when I was about 16, and
Hmm.
sometimes I'd only write in it 2 or 3 times a year,
Yeah.
but other times I'd write in it, every other day, depending. I think again, when my life was very stressful, I would write more.
Absolutely. And I personally don't ever, I don't think I've ever looked back on a past journal to relive anything or to review, or I think it's more of that healing thing in the moment. I can't part with them. They're
Mhm.
apart maybe one day, or maybe one day my son will say, I want to know what my mom was like when she was younger or what have you. But and I think in this case, then when did the idea come that this might be something that, or I mean, what did you think? I don't want to even say maybe you were thinking
Well,
this might help.
sure. I don't think I woke up one day and but maybe I did. It was sort of an evolution. I think as I went, I thought I think I'd like to bind this together and give it to my kids for a memory of their grandparents and what we went through at this time. And
Hmm.
so at that point, I started um, recalling and writing down more things and organizing it a little bit and thinking, this will be a great memento for our family. And
Hmm.
eventually, over time, I went to Kinko's when there used to be a Kinko's and had it spiral bound. I had
Yeah.
pictures in it, and I gave it to each of my kids. And then my friend said, I'd really like to read that. Would you share the manuscript with me? So I shared the PDF with her, and she said, "This is really good. I think you should publish this." And I'm like, "Right."
Had you ever written before, like to write a book, or were you right?
I,
Would you consider yourself a writer?
well, I think I've always secretly been a writer, but before my job, my career was as a lactation consultant.
Really?
Yes, for 30 years.
30
That
years.
was
Wow.
all of my partner and I, the partner in business,
Huh.
we were probably two of the first lactation consultants in the Northwest to actually be hired for pay rather than volunteer work.
A
And
pioneer you are, Vicki.
I would consider ourselves pioneers, but we
Yeah.
wrote for. The long story. Could have made it shorter, maybe. For lactation journals, uh,
Yes.
I'd been published more than a dozen times in different lactation journals. Our speaking, we spoke. Went to conferences and spoke. We ended up in Vienna speaking. So,
Good
yeah,
for
got
you.
around.
Yeah. And
Now,
I,
it's being published.
yeah. Was I would imagine this would be particularly more vulnerable given you're telling story that you're a part of and that
Okay,
it's your parents' story
so
too.
so over time, more people would ask to read it. They knew I'd done this. My friend kind of told people. And so after a few times, I mean, I was sharing it and people kept giving me the same, this was really helpful. You should consider publishing. I thought, well, no, I can't because my brother doesn't come across in a good light and it would be dishonoring my parents to put it all out there. I think that, so for 3 years, nothing happened. So
Mhm.
this is why it took 9 years from when I started to when it was published.
9 years. So people listening, you think, oh, it's been too long. No.
Yeah. So
No.
eventually I ended up with a publisher. And then, of course, it's another year before it finally ends up being published. But,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
I don't even know. It just happened.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing, and the detail, and I think it's a beautiful thing to honor the your mother and your father and their memories. And there are family members that haven't even been born yet, right? And you've given them a window into the life of great grandparents, great that they would never otherwise have known. Those stories would have died with them. And I think,
You know what I like to say? Every time an elder dies, it's like a library burns down. You haven't
oh my
passed off.
goodness.
Yes, unless they've told you all their stories.
See, now if I was Oprah, I would say that's a tweetable moment right there. When an well, yeah, when an elder dies, it's like a library burns down.
Mhm.
Wow, I just got goosebumps. So,
I did too.
yeah.
Get it.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I'm going to ask if I can steal that too, because that's a big part of what we do, is
Mhm.
that we photograph and we tell the stories and the video documentaries, and to leave a legacy, because the stories will be gone.
The stories will be gone. That's why my second book is about my great grandmother, and my third book is about my dad's parents. So
See there, we created a whole thing for you there. You never imagined 30 years. I mean, 30 years is a good run as a lactation
I thought
specialist, right?
on my passion, I move on to be a grandmother full time and
Mhm.
rest on my laurels a little bit, right? It's a,
That's a huge connection for us. 40 years as a nurse practitioner, right? And I'm thinking, but I don't know. My thought was different though. Mine was like, I'm not completely fulfilled. I love what I do, but there's something else and I don't know what it is.
now you
Until
do.
I knew. Yeah, and even then, I had no idea how it would turn out, and that's only been, like, 4 or 5 years.
Well,
So I totally get that.
we're both twice blessed then, because many people spend their whole lives trying to figure out what that person
True,
is.
true. Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday, and then what had come out for me was that the most beautiful things that have happened in my life are when I surrendered and stood back. I said, "Okay, I'm waiting to hear. I'm listening. I'm
Mhm.
listening." And just waited as things landed in my lap, so to speak, and just listened and felt, how does that feel? And there was then no, it was like this mission from God, then from me, that there was like no doubt about it. Then I'm just doing what I'm doing, and I didn't have any second thoughts. It may not have always made sense, and I probably should have, in retrospect, thought a little bit clearer about certain things, but I just thought, okay, and it all worked out, and now look, you're the founder of a nonprofit.
Well, another gift. We talk about All's Authors was the last gift our parents gave us by bringing us together
Mhm,
through the writing of our books. If we hadn't been on the caregiving journey and written the books and
mhm.
then met each other, we're all over. We have New York, well, Jean and Marianne and I, the founders, New York, Ohio, and Montana. And we have on our board a member from North Carolina and one from Toronto. So we would never otherwise. We started this in 2015, but really didn't meet each other all in person until
Uh-huh.
November 2019.
4 years later.
4 years
four
later, we
years later. And what remarkable people. And
well, I mean, we're very committed to lifting the silence and stigma surrounding dementia through the sharing of information,
yeah,
through our books, the personal stories we want to bring other people, let them know they're not alone. We all have a personal story to share, and there are commonalities in every journey, although they're all totally different. There are
right.
commonalities, and I think that just it helps people to heal, to know they're not alone.
Mhm.
Someone else has walked the walk, and if we can connect our authors with the readers, and we've accomplished what we set out to do.
Yeah, I think I've known about you guys since around 2018, 2019, and I just see it. You can't really do a search on Alzheimer's and information or books and you guys don't pop up. It's there, which is wonderful because families are seeking people, people sitting alone in their living room and going, what the heck is going on?
Oh my
Will
goodness.
do a search and, can find where someone else had similar and at least have the idea, maybe we should look into this or
Mhm.
look into that. And that is life-saving. That work is life-saving.
We are very committed to what we're doing. Our website has, and we introduce our authors one a week. Every week we have a new author. They write an essay about the story behind their story, which
Yes.
can lead people to look up their book and see if it's what,
Hmm.
because we do. We're not just Alzheimer's. We're all dementias. People
Yes.
living with dementia, memoirs of taking care of parents or grandparents, as you mentioned, children's books, and
Hmm.
there's activity books. There's teen book for teens. There's fiction books even that have a message to
Yeah.
share. So it's
Yeah.
we've profiled over 260 um, authors at this point. So we're
I've been one of them. I'm trying to think what year
yes,
that was. I think 2019,
I think
maybe. I
that's
mean, this is well before Doggies for Dementia was even an idea for me.
wow.
Hmm. Just what a time that was for me. And yeah, and I recall, and I thought, wow, it's just a wonderful. I never thought about it being a founder of a nonprofit either.
Yeah, really, to get our nonprofit status last year has been a big deal for
Me
sure.
too. What a year, right?
What a year, a good part of the year.
Yeah. Well, I so respect what you're doing and what you've done and how you took a situation, a really challenging situation in your life and see it as gifts from your parents, that they're gifts and they're not done giving. I know you said all authors, but as you continue, you're meeting more and more people and even as a guest on here, you're reaching more people and their memory continues to to be the seed of so much good, so much good. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank
So,
you for what you're doing. Thank you.
well, yeah. I have such gratitude for that. And we have another really important topic we want to talk about. Vicki and I do, and it's looking at some of the end of life issues and maybe question that we're all afraid to ask, we're all afraid to talk about, but we're going to go there. So stay tuned for part two. And thank you for today, Vicki. What a great day for me. Thank you.
Great
And
conversation. Thank you.
you. All right, y'all. We'll see you later. Thanks for watching.